this week, Pope Francis made a couple of big statements, and the first one I want to begin with is on Twitter. Pope Francis used some strong language on this week on Twitter and said, "Let us keep in mind that not even a murderer loses his personal dignity. God himself guarantees it. The firm rejection of the death penalty shows to what extent it is possible to recognize the inalienable dignity of every human being. Hashtag Fratelli Tutti, hashtag no death penalty." That's a strong statement. And I have to say, Pope Francis has been kind of on a roll of really strong statements that not every person, and definitely not every Catholic, has been feeling very comfortable with. And so I want to dive a little bit into this particular statement because it especially has some significant impact on American culture and politics right now. And so what Pope Francis is saying is that no matter what crime someone commits, even a murderer cannot diminish their own human dignity, because where does our human dignity come from? It's a gift from God. God is the one who gives us life. He gives us human dignity. We have our dignity in that we are created as God's image and likeness. And so nothing that we do, nothing that anyone else does, can take away that dignity. And because of that death penalty is fundamentally against the rights of a human being. We as humans do not have the right to take the life of another. Of course, as Catholic Christians, we should be pro-life people. But it's been interesting to me to see that oftentimes as pro-life people, we fail to embrace all aspects of life. And certainly in this week's politics, it's been important to consider what being a pro-life American Catholic looks like, because in the news, President Trump just announced that he has scheduled 5 federal executions during his final weeks as president. And this is something that I haven't heard a whole lot of people, especially in the pro-life movement, say much about. And so I want to cover this story just a little bit. It says, when convicted murderer Orlando Hall was executed at a federal prison complex in Indiana on November 19th, it marked the first time in more than a century that a federal execution was carried out in the remaining months of an outgoing U.S. president's term following an election. But this will not be the only execution during the final weeks of President Donald Trump's term. 5 other federal inmates condemned to death, including the only woman currently on federal death row, are scheduled to be executed over the next 2 months. The last is slated to take place just 5 days before Trump leaves office on January 20th. The last post-election federal execution took place in 1889 during the final months of Grover Cleveland's first presidency. If all 5 planned executions proceed, a total of 13 federal prisoners will have been executed by lethal injection between July 2020 and January 2021, concluding shortly before President-elect Joe Biden is inaugurated on January 20th. The 10 federal executions in 2020 are more than any previous year in the 20th or 21st centuries, according to the Death Penalty Information Center. And there's one more quote that I want to read. If they could live past Trump getting out of office and Biden coming in, they will live, said Helen Pregine, a Roman Catholic sister and longtime advocate for the abolition of the death penalty. And I just want to say, good on you, Sister Helen. It's important for us to recognize that this is an important pro-life issue. And it weighs on me a lot that so many people in the pro-life movement who are quick to jump on any issue of abortion have been seemingly quiet on this significant abuse against human rights and human life. And perhaps, admittedly, maybe I'm just not following the right pro-life people. And if there are pro-life people who are walking the walk in that way, please tell me who they are, because I would love to be following them. But it's troubling that the president that so many pro-lifers tout as the most pro-life president in history is pushing forward these 5 federal executions shortly before he leaves office. And so as modern Catholic Christians, we have to recognize that abortion is an important issue that we all have to be standing against. And I know it was an issue that many people talked about in preparation for the election a month ago. But that does not diminish that there are other areas of being pro-life that we should also be speaking up against, like the death penalty, like euthanasia, like, so many others. We can't be a one-issue political movement, because that greatly falls short of being pro-life. It's simply just anti-abortion. And that is not what God is calling us to. God is calling us to be people of life and love and mercy. And now I know, before I finish talking about this, I know many people often kind of diminish what Pope Francis says and kind of, write him off as a liberal pope. But I want to point out that Pope Francis highlighted and referenced an important church encyclical written by Pope John Paul II. I want to read a piece from that. It comes from the encyclical Evangelium Vitae, which is the encyclical letter on the value and inviolability of human life. And in paragraph 9, Pope John Paul II is speaking about the first murder that we see in the book of Genesis, and when Cain kills Abel. And there's a couple of things here that I want to highlight. Pope John Paul II begins by saying, "But God cannot leave the crime unpunished," speaking of the crime of Cain against Abel, and says, "From the ground on which it has been spilt, the blood of one murdered demands that God should render justice. From this text, the Church has taken the name of the sins which cry to God for justice, and first among them, she has included willful murder." And so there, John Paul II is affirming that murder is wrong, and that those who commit murder should be held accountable, and there is a need for justice. But however, he continues on, and I'm going to skip down a little bit here. And it continues, "And yet God, who is always merciful, even when he punishes, put a mark on Cain, lest any who came upon him should kill him. He thus gave him a distinctive sign, not to condemn him to the hatred of others, but to protect and defend him from those wishing to kill him, even out of a desire to avenge Abel's death. Not even a murderer loses his personal dignity, and God himself pledges to guarantee this. And it is precisely here that the paradoxical mystery of the merciful justice of God is shown forth." And so what John Paul II reminds us there is that from the beginning, God has acknowledged that murder, killing someone, crimes should be held accountable in justice. But also, our God is a merciful God, and we are called to mercy as well. As Catholic Christians, we are not called just to justice. Justice is easy. Mercy is much more challenging. And so when we recognize that each person has that human dignity that cannot be taken away or given up by any crime or action, then there is no room for the death penalty. And it's important to recognize that John Paul II certainly understood justice and mercy. As a man who grew up in Nazi Poland and served as a priest and bishop in the Soviet Union and communist-controlled Poland, by no means was he a stranger to human rights violations. By no means was he a stranger to terrible actions against humanity. But he still recognized the human dignity despite all of it. And we are called to do the same. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for participating in this very first low-key Catholic show. Go become saints, love your neighbor, and I will see you next time.